Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 4 p.m. Obsessed live show. And this afternoon, you're in for a real treat. I'm joined by Kim Kleidon, otherwise known as Mimi to her grandchildren, who after 8 years with the ABC radio has left to pursue her love of storytelling, writing children's books, and making the world a better place by talking about sustainability. Kim, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Annette, you've made my heart beat a little bit faster. Thank you very much for that glorious introduction.
Oh, that's okay. Look, I do aim to please, and I'm glad that you're sitting down.
It's funny actually being on the other side of the interview. You know, it's not often you get interviewed when you've been an interviewer for so long, so it's lovely.
I know, it must be really odd. I know having worked as a journalist, that when someone writes a story about you, it's like, oh, really? Like I feel like I am on the wrong side of the microphone here. So you've left the ABC, and like what an amazing career that you had. Like you talked to some of the most incredible human beings. Has storytelling always been a big part of who you are?
It's funny, you know, I think I wrote in an original script for my website that people have always poured their guts out to me from a young age. You know, I've always had this ability to instantly connect with anyone, whether they were, you know, from the wrong side of the tracks or living the high life, maybe even royalty. I've never had that opportunity, but politicians, like so many different people, and I just treat everyone the same. And I think that I didn't realize until I just was leaving ABC in 2015 that my birth name, which is Kim Postle, actually is literally transferred to chief storyteller, because Postle, as in the apostles, were the storytellers of their village, and that's how the name came about. And so it's funny that I've arrived at this point in my life 50 years on.
Isn't that amazing? It's like I really resonate with that, because I don't think Philips stands for anything other than maybe colour television. But then you go, that's all about storytelling. That's it's a purpose and a drive, isn't it? When you just totally get off on asking questions and finding out stuff about people, that you can help share their passion and their purpose as well.
You know, storytelling is becoming more and more important as we move through and try and, I suppose, awaken those original human things where connection is so important. And the way we connect is through sharing stories and through sharing our experiences, because that way other people can sort of buy in and say, oh my goodness, I had a similar experience. And then they don't feel so alone. And having been through mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, and I know that might sound funny because I was in the public eye and I conducted a radio program, not just in the ABC, but I had a commercial media job before that. So people don't think that someone like, you know, that's so out there and so public and so gregarious could even suffer from depression and anxiety. But we're beginning to understand now that a lot of the creative spirits can, you know, be affected by depression and anxiety. And it even shocked me. I never saw myself as someone who would suffer from a panic attack. But when I started getting heart palpitations and I started having real issues, you know, it came to a crescendo, and I had to acknowledge that, yes, I do suffer from anxiety, and I had to rein it in and use those energies that my body was creating to throw it into something else. And now that I'm free to share the stories that I really am passionate about, and I operate under 5 different pillars of health, education, entertainment, animals, and people. And they're the things, even in my own life. I mean, excuse me if you get the farm noises, the rooster is so annoying, but we live on acreage, and our whole goal in life is to live a sustainable existence where we can create provenance around the produce that we have here on the farm. So we're cultivating things like meat chickens, eggs. We have goats. There's about 20 of them out in the paddock at the moment that came from Middle Percy Island. Great story in itself. And we've got fish that my husband's breeding up. He just comes across these things. Bees up the top paddock, you know, so it's all happening here on the Kleidon farm, believe me.
Oh my God, that sounds like a children's story in itself.
Well,
that's so cool. You've got bees.
Children are Yeah, we've got bees. So we haven't actually harvested our first honey. We only got them in December, but they've been so busy and they've been out all over the place that we've had to put another stack in the, I don't even know what it's called. And my husband talks and I just sort of film him, so. But the whole goal is, if you want to be self-sufficient, you need to grow. I mean, we've got gardens as well. We grow pawpaws, papayas, bananas, pineapples, herbs, fruits, vegetables that are seasonal. And we want to be able to create that sort of a space where you not only can grow your own food, but share it with others. And we grow it sustainably and organically as possible, not certified, but operating under permaculture, biodynamic, all those sorts of principles that allow your soil to recover, and treating it the way it should be treated so that it provides nutritional, healthy foods. So, there's so much going on. I learned a lot of that at ABC, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience and to be able to pick people's brains, and share that knowledge, not only with the listeners, but all the people in my family. So my daughter's on farm with my grandchildren, they're on cattle and cane. And my big thing is to leave a legacy to those kids that you've inherited all this land, but you don't have to have a monoculture. You can actually grow a wealth of things if you look after what you've got. So that's where it all started. And I've always wanted to write children's books. And I was working with a client, Charles Alder, actually, at Rural Aid, and we were talking about men's suicide rates, and it's prevalent through farming and regional and rural communities of Australia. And I said to him, gee, we need to get to the women and the children. And that's how Huggle, Snuggle, Cuddle came about, actually. I was thinking about how you influence the people who support the men. And so this children's book that I wrote came to me very quickly, and I found a style. And it was never published with that purpose, but now I've taken a hold of it during COVID-19 when we had no work, and I've decided now it's time. So, I've sent it off to the printers, and I can't wait to have a copy when it gets back, because it's written in poetry and it's about animals that hug and snuggle and cuddle their young, and they're animals from all over the world. And so I'm just uber excited. Can you tell?
I can. Huggle, cuddle, snuggle. I just feel
Huggle,
warm
snuggle,
and fuzzy just saying it.
Good. Well,
do you think,
Kim,
right, like you're talking about having this multi-diverse, growing environment that you've got going on, do you find it interesting that we're here in 2020, we've got, I've got, funny lights here lighting up my face, and phones and cameras and screens and things everywhere, that we seem to be going back to some of those good old-fashioned ways of living. Why do you think that it's becoming so desirable to live that way?
I think we can learn a lot from our past. And I work with a lot of farmers, from sugarcane growers who are trying to reduce nutrient runoff and chemicals to the reef, to farmers in drought, all through with Rural Aid. We travelled extensively through New South Wales and Queensland. And even they are looking at what they're left with and the changing environment and thinking, maybe my granddad knew a thing or two. And they're even admitting that in a lot of the stories we're sharing. And I think that the more disconnected we become virtually through technology and, all those types of tools, the more we're looking for purpose, place, and connection with others. So I think the sharing of knowledge that goes on so freely between rural communities and even, city communities, where you've got someone who reaches out and wants to learn, and there's always someone there who has the information you seek to actually improve whatever area of your life it is you're looking to improve in. And growing food is no different. However, it is one of the most important things we need to master, because I believe, and this is what I don't understand about the climate change debate, is that we need to be valuing the things that the earth provides. It is the only one in our entire solar system that has the air we need to breathe, the clean water we need to drink, and our animals need to drink, nature needs to drink. And as well as that, the healthy soil. If we don't look after the soil, we can't grow food. It beggars belief.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? And I watch all of these people talking about conspiracies and the New World Order and these people who are trying to control the world through greed and their megalomania. And I'm like going, for what purpose? Like, if there's no planet left and we're all sick and our environment is dying, why? Like, why? What are you expecting the outcome to be?
If someone can answer that question for both of us, I'd be relieved. So if someone's watching now and they have an answer as to why, we need to build and continue building and building and growing, to what end? Because if we overpopulate this very finite, I should say, resource, then we're not going to be able to sustain any future populations. And that's a concern I have for my grandchildren. A lot of people say, oh, well, I don't care because I won't be here. Well, your children will be, and your grandchildren and their children. So if you're that selfish that you can't see, and even if they're not your kids, don't you have a heart for children? Is there no compassion left in the world to think about the legacy that we leave? And that's the thing I take very, very seriously, is my legacy. I don't want my grandchildren talking about me like, oh God, she was one of them. She left us nothing and depleted all the resources. But she lived in a nice house. She drove a fabulous car and she had a lot of money. I don't think so.
And her cheeks were absolutely amazing. Do you think that
I
this
used
is?
To have amazing cheeks.
Oh yeah, me too. Mine are a bit chubby now, but that's okay. More to grab onto. Do you think? I don't know why I said that. Do you think that you mentioned social disconnection, which is one of the things that really intrigued me about when you reached out to us, is that for all of this ways that we have of connecting and this almost selfishness that we live our lives, are we getting further and further away from what it means to be a human being?
I actually posted a bit of a story on Facebook this morning over an experience I had with my granddaughter last week. Now, this is a child I've been really connected to. She's so much like me. It's just not funny, but I have this deep connection with Isabel, and we went to pick all the kids up from kindy in school last week, and I was standing at the car with Henry. He'd been picked up at kindy, and Isabel saw me and she bolted straight over to the car. And she's a hugger. We're all huggers. And I relayed this story to people on Facebook that as soon as I leant down and put my arms out, she pulled back and she went and looked around her to see if anyone had seen. And I was just like, what are we doing to our precious children? She's 5 years old. And now she's got to think about whether or not someone can see her hugging her grandmother in a public place. So this is the sort of disconnect I'm experiencing in real time. And it concerns me that we're losing precious moments because, God forbid, if something happened to me tomorrow, I've had, since March, very little contact with them because we take it very seriously. I'm an asthmatic. I'm the last person who wants to contract COVID-19. But I also feel that if we don't hold on to the physical, the emotional, the psychological connections in our lives, we're going to see some devastating consequences 5 years down the track. And I know that we have a lot of virtual tools to remain connected, and I've been using them, and the best ones are FaceTime. I've been screenshotting. Isabel's the only one. She's always ringing me on FaceTime and showing me around the garden, and she's just amazing. She's one of those kids who's just uber connected and wants to share, and so she's got a really expressive face, and she's just engaging. And so I've been screenshotting because that's the only contact I've been having with her over this time. I mean, in recent weeks, I've been able to see them, and at home it's different. They are in contact with me now, but there was a time when I was visiting way back in April, May, as restrictions were starting to ease up, where, even their mother was reinforcing, no touching, no touching. Harry, the eldest, he was dobbing me, and Mimi touched me. And I'm like, no, he touched me.
Dobber.
And so we were having all, yeah, he is, because Harry's the eldest, so he's had a lot of responsibility, and he's a very special boy who likes to make sure that everyone is, in control. But I think that the risk of you losing interactions, especially things we already had some disconnect through social media, a lot of people are now communicating, and it annoys the shit out of me when people try to message me on Facebook when they've got my phone number. I'm like, really? I'm on there like once a fortnight and you're sending me a message asking me questions or inviting me to something? I've already missed it. Like, let's get back to those communication values. Let's text our friends. Let's ring them up and see how they're going. Let's FaceTime. Let's get on Zoom. all those opportunities. I love technology. It is definitely part of the solution. And even for farmers, when we were talking before about sustainability, technology will be a huge part of that moving forward because everything's so much easier now.
Very true. And I always find it really fascinating when you come across people who go, oh, I don't do that, and it's like, whatever it might be Zoom, it might be Facebook, it might be whatever way it is to communicate. And I'm almost like, why would you discount any way that we can be connecting more together? Where, I'm different. I love Facebook. It gives me such an insight into the people I'm connected with. I can see when they're having parties or when they've gone somewhere or when they're celebrating something or even when they're on hard times. And I feel like I'm a bigger part of people's lives, even though I may not be able to be there physically. So I guess we're all different, aren't we? We're all different.
I think a lot of it comes down to fear, though, Annette. Like, I know my mother, she's in her 70s now, and she doesn't do online banking. She doesn't have an email account. She doesn't use Facebook. Whereas my dad, he does all those things, So it comes down to the individual, and I can understand people's concerns. Look at how many media stories you see where people have been ripped off and some, Nigerian prince has lured them into some sort of romantic scam and then now getting other people's money and giving it to them. So, and there's so much hacking and, but there are protections. And I think if my security settings on Facebook, unless you're a friend of a friend, you can't even friend me. So, you can control a lot of it. You just need more knowledge.
Knowledge is power, they say. And you certainly sharing a lot of that today. What I'd really like to know from you is something that you'd like to see changed. If you had a magic wand and you can go, I'm going to change the world, what would be the thing that you would focus on first to change?
You're dreadful. Like, for a start, Fancy's bringing such a big question on me at no notice. Look at her. She's like, you're happy with yourself, aren't you? I think the thing I'd like to see in the world is that people remember their humanity. We need to be reminded. I was fortunate at the age of 25, I had a near-death experience and I was in a coma for a week. My children were 2 and 1 at the time. I was 25 years old. And I looked at that and I think it should be mandatory. When you reach 25, you need a near-death experience because it changed my whole perspective of everything. Like, I'd lived fully. And I didn't regret one day of my life at that point, even though my mother was always telling me, you need to save for the future and you need to do this and you need to do that. Why did you leave your hairdressing apprenticeship? All this stuff. And I was thinking, you know what? I don't regret anything I've done up until this point. And the only thing I would have regretted was that I left my children without a mother at the age of 2 and 1. So I think that, and that would have been out of my control. But when you reevaluate life and what really matters and you get a big perspective, like I got from a near-death experience, nothing is that big a drama. The loss of your life is the worst thing that can happen to you. And so my children were then raised in a house where it didn't matter what happened. It was like, as long as you tell the truth. If you lie to me, all hell will break loose. But if you tell me the truth, and if it's something that's just minor or it's just a material possession or you've destroyed something, even if you've done something really, really bad, I still love you and I will support you through whatever it is you're going through. Because to lose them would be worse than any of that. So if people could just realize their humanity, reach out to people who they might judge from a distance. I was watching the what's it called? The homeless show on SBS last night, and because I'd watched the first series, and it's really eye-opening to see people put in that position. And it is like a near-death experience. It's like you've lost everything. This is what you're given, and now you need to go out there and figure it out. So, and these people, they're reeling. In the first 24 hours, some of them were having major problems with being so disconnected. So if we can remember that everyone has their story, everyone has a situation that is not yours, and therefore not judge them on the way they may be behaving or the things that they're saying. It's coming from a place usually of pain.
Is that Filthy Rich and Homeless on SBS? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that link up in the chat because I saw that and went, I really want to watch that, because it's so easy for us to extend our arm out and go, that doesn't impact me. That's not my problem. That's somebody, and someone else can look after that, but as humans, we really worry about what other people think of us, don't we? So it's like almost a disconnect between that selfishness that we have and that desire to be significant and have an impact on the world.
Fear again. I was in Sydney doing some training for ABC. Must have been about 2012, 2013. And we were sent out onto the streets as part of our 2-week training to find some stories. And I was walking down a street near the Ultimo Studios, and there was a guy there in a wheelchair who'd lost both of his legs at the knee. And he was sort of sitting there like homeless people do, collecting money. He had a place to live, but he couldn't have a job. And obviously living in Sydney, it's very difficult to survive on any type of payment from the government. So I stopped and I chatted to him, and he was, I think, happy that someone actually paused for a moment and had a conversation with him. And he was telling me his story. It brought tears to my eyes, and he allowed me to record it as part of this exercise. So I sat down and had a chat with him on the street in Sydney. And I was so moved by his story. I went back to Ultimo's and I grabbed my purse and got my key card, and I went back and withdrew $100 to go and give to this man. And when I told people that that's what I was doing, they thought I was crazy. And then I don't give it to him. He'll just buy cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs. I said, you know what? I don't care what he spends the money on, because if that's his life, if he goes and spends that on food and something nutritious, that's my ultimate goal. I had no control over that money once it had left my hands, but I had hoped that something between us had transpired, and the connection we'd made meant that he would treat that money with the respect it was given in.
But I hear what you're saying. I was in New York a couple of years ago and was standing at the entrance to Central Park, and this big dude, like he was big, came up and he got in my face. And, I kind of stepped back and we started, he scared the shit out of me. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to get mugged. And we started talking, and he asked me for money, and I went, what do you want it for? And he said, I want to buy some liquor. And I'm like, oh, I don't really want to give you money if you're going to go get tanked. And my husband said to him, well, come on, let's go over to the diner and we'll buy you some lunch. And he went, I don't want lunch. I want to go drink with my friends. And it made me realise that who am I to judge what that man does with it? Like you just said, if that's what makes him happy and helps him get through that day, have some money, dude. Maybe.
So watch the episode, because it's there's the Melbourne. I think he's the deputy mayor who's in there at the moment. He's having some very big life lessons in the first 24 hours. And I think if you watch that first episode, you'll understand how people's perceptions, because in Melbourne, evidently, there's a law it's illegal to give people cash in the streets like that. So, people who are caught taking money from people are in just as much trouble as people who give it to them, I presume. And he's now rethinking that, because he's on the streets begging for $1 so he can buy a cup of coffee, because he's been given nothing. He's had his wallet and his jewelry and everything taken off him. They've been dressed in, just everyday clothes you'd pick up at Vinnie's for $1, and they've been sent out on the street with one of those checkered bags with meager possessions. And now he's realizing that he's desperate, and some of them are losing their identity, after the first couple of days of living on the streets, and they're wondering what their purpose is. So those sorts of reflections to me mean that we need to take a real deep look at the way society has ended up discarding so many people, and usually through no fault of their own. Some of them fall on hard times, they lose their job, they might start drinking, and then they find out they're an alcoholic, then their family leaves them. And I heard these stories in Sydney when I worked up at King's Cross at the Ozrock Cafe back in the late 80s, and I couldn't believe there was an old man, he used to come in, and I was working in one of the bars, and we had a bit of a takeaway section at the end, and he used to come up to the window, and he'd come every second day or something, and he'd get his flagon of goon. And one day I stopped and I said to him, where are you living? And he said, in my car. And I said, what happened? How did you end up living out of your car? And he told me this story, which is exactly what I've just told you, that he lost his job, he started drinking, his wife and kids left him, and all he was left with was the car. And so he parked it up at King's Cross, and that was where he was living on welfare, and he was just wandering out. He was clean. He was always shaven. He had, places to go for showers and all that sort of support, but he had nowhere else to live, and he was still drinking, obviously. So alcoholism isn't something that happens to people. It's disease. It's in them. It's something that's triggered, and it's very difficult to stop.
And I guess that's a part of our social disconnection, isn't it? Is that we see these people living on the streets, and it's so easy for our eyes to slide over them, to either judge them in that moment and then to write them off as a waste of space because we feel that they're not contributing. And I guess that's what's so powerful about what you have done as a journalist with the ABC, and now what you do through storytelling is to tell those people's stories. How important is it from your perspective that everyday people open up and share what's happened to them from any perspective of their life?
This is exactly what I talked about when I had the opportunity to do a TEDx presentation back in 2007, 18 it was. Oh, it seems like a lifetime ago. In fact, that's where you got that filthy photo of me with my mouth wide open, which, it often is. So
I did read the comment on your Facebook post and was, that doesn't look like you, Kim, at all.
So during TEDx, we were doing Connection, and I had previously been on the community panel because we were working with a community group. So TEDx, if nobody knows, is a community sort of structured TED talk. And we had 100 people in the audience. So the first time I'd been the MC, and the second time they invited me to speak because we'd chosen the topic of connect. And I don't know if you've noticed in my emails, but when I went out into business, I decided that my tagline would be communicate to connect. Because if we're going to communicate with people, why waste our time with jargon and empty, hollow crap when we could be sharing something real and connecting? So when you ask me about, how important is it? Well, if we don't, we're going to lose more people. We're going to actually discard more of human beings onto the streets and disassociate ourselves from it. But that could be you, that could be your child, could be your father, it could be your mother. And if we start looking at statistics, that makes it even worse because they become nameless, faceless numbers, which, I suppose it's easier for governments to deal with that sort of stats and facts. But from my perspective, I prefer to deal with individuals who have a story, listen to that story, understand that story, and then offer any assistance I can.
Oh my gosh, I'm coming to live with you. If that's
no,
okay.
I just got rid of the kids.
I'm sustainable. I'm sustainable. I wash up. I clean up. If we just to that. You don't need him. You need a sister. I read you've only got one sibling. You need more.
Oh my God, and he's a boy. I do need a sister. You're it, Annette. From this day forward, you shall be known as my sis.
Yay. Awesome. See, this is the good thing about doing this show. I've got new sisters and friends and people all over the world now. I've never want for anywhere to stay or people to hug. To wrap
You're doing
up,
a great job.
I love what you've had to say. If you had to leave the world with a legacy, what would your legacy be?
That I tried to share enough information, knowledge, whatever it is, for people to be able to connect. I want to be remembered as someone who shared powerful stories that provided people with enough information to make changes in their life that meant, real living. And I think that if that's how it ends up, and I know for my children and my grandchildren it will be anyway, and they're all that matters to me. But if I can influence more people in the world to come around to this way of thinking, my life has been worth living.
Oh, I definitely think it has been. I just listening, I could listen to you forever, but we can't. We've only got 30 minutes. Please send me the link to your book so I can share it into our group because it sounds like such a beautiful book. I've put into the comment box, people, the Filthy Rich and Homeless, which sounds like something that we should all watch and remind ourselves that at a moment's notice our lives can change, as Kim shared, with your near-death experience. Kim Kleidon, It has been a pleasure having you on this afternoon, and I shall look forward to many more conversations.
Go to kimkleidon.com for more.
You heard it right there, people. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.